notification?
The notification?
The notification.
The notification.
Yes. I said notification.
I think there is. I think we have on Tentacle Quest one, we have a couple thousand subscribers, right?
Something like that. But yeah, we'll see who shows up.
Well, there won't be many people showing up now for sure, but this is good because there's so few people here. I don't have to pretend to be sane.
Yes. You know? I mean, how much of a costume do you put on when it's 100 plus that show up?
Right. So you'll see my mask of sanity will increase in thickness, like layers of foundation per 100 people. It's an extra level.
I definitely have to open my mouth a bit more when I speak. Like, I actually have to try to enunciate. I don't like moving my lips when I talk, you know?
You're such a Californian.
Yeah, like I don't really feel like talking. Dude, sometimes I'll catch myself right after I mumble something and I'm like, shit, is that how I actually speak? Be like, I was thinking like it's just like a low rumble. It's like subwoofer.
Okay, talking. See, that's why you get in trouble with your neighbors, because your low rumble just goes through the entire Czech building.
Yeah, it shakes the whole room, man. just my diaphragm.
So it alternates between low rumble and then hysterical Joker-like cackle. And
yeah, I'm very versatile in terms of speaking range. Singing is like a whole different story, but when I talk, it's like all over the place.
All over the shop.
Look at that UFO behind you, man.
That's the Radio City Tower. It's very famous and iconic, and I'm crashing it with my fingers.
It looks like a UFO, or it looks like a dumbbell. Do you lift that?
I do. That's how I work my traps. That's how I trap.
Just put it back.
Just put it down, lad. When you're done, it's my goal now. Okay, kid. Let's lift that a little bit.
All right. So, hello, everybody. This is the first Tentacle Croissant podcasting, which is going to be extremely casual. We don't have to actually try to put on a metaphorical suit when we speak, which is good.
I like the way you say suit, though.
So is it notification or notification?
It's notification. Well, it is in English. It's notification. I've never heard notification before, but
you guys are outdated. You guys created the language, but y'all are outdated.
I know. We're behind. We need Americans to show us how to speak l'anglais.
How does it make you feel that America just stole the language and then now it just influences the rest of the vocabulary?
Well, this is one of the interesting things. We discussed it about when we were talking about cultural appropriation. It's one of the many things that makes English people feel like we get a say in what happens in America. And it pisses Americans off. They're like, why do you feel so entitled to just have opinions about our country? We're not gobbing off about British politics. And it's one of the things. It's like, well, you goddamn stole our language, ruined it, and then disseminated it to the rest of the fucking world. So now when I go to Singapore and I want to speak to somebody and they'll go, oh, I speak English, they're going to speak to me in an American accent.
Yeah. And everyone that I've spoken to, because I did that English teaching course where I'm legally able to actually teach English, everybody, I'm talking about 99% of people want American Hollywood, California English.
That's our reparations as English people. We want reparations, and our reparations are that we get to talk shit about America and Americans. That's all. That's all we're asking for. We don't want more than that. We just want to be able to say whatever the hell we want.
But I mean, the thing is, we wouldn't even understand. we don't get the slang. We don't get the vocabulary. We don't get the grammar. We don't even know what the hell you're saying. Anyways, we don't get the sarcasm on top of that.
Well, it's a funny thing as a Brit going to America when Americans treat you like something exotic as well. That's really bewildering because it's like, why? So if I go to California, the guys will all be like, oh, I bet you get all the chicks. You just like show up and be like, oh, hello, tip top of the morning to you. I know the Queen. They do that weird English accent. Right. And I'm like, that's not how it works at all. It's not how. Oh, is this your girlfriend? Oh, she's
the strange thing is that British accent or England in general is as exotic as America is willing to tolerate or even comprehend. Right. Where it's like you don't really like see German or French, and and if you did, you wouldn't even really engage with them. But the moment American hears a British person, they're like, wow, it's like the most
Yeah.
exotic as you can get in the
Yes.
typical perspective of what an American sees.
Yeah, I think probably it's films as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like
Harry
spectacle.
Potter.
Harry Potter. Harry Potter.
Right.
Nobody speaks like that. It's like very, I know maybe two people who speak that way. It's very rare for people to actually speak like that because we have
Yeah.
so many regional dialects here. But isn't that the tyranny of spectacle? Like it's about films ultimately. It's about our ideas of reality. It's not about
Yeah.
reality at all.
That was a
And
great segue into the metaphysical talk that we'll get into right now.
yeah,
But what I was going to say is that, well, it's funny because you see it. Well, I saw it in the English teaching course. So
right.
it's all American kids, like mostly from Midwest, Central America.
Yeah.
Like not like Panama, Mexico, Central America, but like in the
Different
middle
Central America.
in the middle of the
Middle
United States.
America.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you're gonna take off your sweater right now, huh?
Oh,
Okay. Welcome to Tentacle Croissant Uncensored.
it's uncensored X. It's getting hot in here, Pierre.
And then there was
Yeah.
one English dude in the class, and like he got all of the attention from the girls. But
Really?
it's like also
Which country was this, and can I go there today?
so this was in Prague, like right when I moved here. So there's
Heavens.
one dude, and then all the American girls are just like, I like him, like I'm fucking what's an English name? I don't know. But Timothy. Oh my god. So, but it's funny because we're in a different country where there's tons of other dudes around from all over the place. And me not saying that I deserve the attention, and by all means no, but on paper, I would look like something that's way more different and exotic than whoever's in the class. But that English guy is the safety limit of what's tolerated in terms of exotic for them.
That perfect combination of exoticism and safety
and familiarity. It's like just different enough, but it's safe because I feel like,
yeah. I like that in my men too.
But yeah, I think. Sorry.
Could you do an English accent though?
I think I've tried a few times with you, and it doesn't come off as good. I hope.
I'll tell you what. When you come to England and you come up to Liverpool and we do some work here, I'm going to teach you to do a Scouse accent. Now, if you can pull off a Scouse accent, that's going to really fly very, very well.
I can do the posh halfway, but the actual the other English accents, my mouth can't do it.
Yeah, well, no, it's the same for us. So if you said to me, do like a Geordie accent or a Brummie accent, they're English accents, but I can't do them. They're so dramatically different.
Yeah. So to go on the idea of like the movie influence, I think that it's crazy. I think you and we don't exactly view life just directly through of what a camera lens would be, or like a movie generally. We are able to differentiate or whatever. But I never realized actually how many people view each other and life through what the movies and TV shows have influenced them to see. And I see it's actually really, really, really common where everyone's ideas of what you should say or how people should behave, or an idea of like, Prague or whatever, or a foreign country is generally determined through a movie. But this is also primarily for Americans, because I think a lot of the view of the world that we have is just all through shows, YouTube, movies, social media and stuff.
I have something to say about that. I had a little revelation last night. I went to see with my my half brother. I went to see this new film called 1917. It's about World War I
want to see that. I just saw like a thing on YouTube on it, and it looks really, really cool.
It's a one shot. It's one shot.
Yeah. Is it worth it?
It's definitely worth going to see. A bit for me, a bit like Dunkirk. I don't know if you saw Dunkirk, the Christopher Nolan movie. Both of them are like near but misses for me. There's too many missed opportunities that I can't quite let them off the hook for, and it's also riddled with political ideology, which I really find myself loathing now. Like if I see any politics, it could be right, left, center, I don't care. I just don't. I'm like, can we stop? Just leave it out of entertainment. But the thought I had after the film, because the film obviously it's at one constant timeline, so it's very intense for the viewer for 2 hours. And before that, I'd been listening to Eckhart Tolle, who's all about the power of now. That's his whole pitch, the power of now. One of the things that people like Eckhart Tolle and a lot of the like spiritual teachers, let's say, one of the things that they aren't saying, but they probably should be saying, is to everybody, to just echo your earlier point, stop watching TV. Stop watching movies, because it puts you in time. We can't think about anything now without it being in time. And where this came from was me looking at the World War I movie and realizing as I'm watching it, where movies were up to in World War I was very basic. They were just movies. They weren't talkies. There was no sound. There was and it was, you will have heard the stories of people who went to a cinema and they saw a train rushing towards them and they screamed because they thought they were going to be hit by a train.
Yeah.
So imagine World War I. You've never seen a war movie. You've never seen somebody being shot. You're just a kid from Birmingham or Liverpool or wherever, and you're sent there. That level of violence and trauma, you don't even have movies. You have no expectation and no possible way of knowing how fucking awful it's going to be. So I was watching that and I was thinking, God, movies have such a big impact on us. I suspect that the level of shell shock that they had would have been look, if you're you live in the country, even just meeting that many people would be weird. If you're a soldier on the front lines and you're in a platoon of 100 people and you're barracked with all these other men around you, you go to France. Fucking hell. In 1914, sorry. Who's going to France? The like low class, bottom rung of the ladder English people. They don't take fucking holidays. So it would have been, they were fighting in a foreign country against German speaking men, all this machinery around them, the very cutting edge of modernity, a level of violence they had no way of conceptualizing. And I was like, holy shit, all of that, we at least have some sense now. I mean, these kids now who are making the memes about World War III, they've been playing Call of Duty since they were 8. This generation may be soft, but they're way more prepared in some senses for what that will look like and sound like. Those guys had no fucking idea.
Yeah. There's a conspiracy theory that a lot of these games and the movies that are being put out are almost to desensitize the upcoming generation. So if there are times that where it would include or need soldiers, basically, a lot of the people are more inclined to do it. The younger generation, even though they have no idea what it's actually like, they think it's just point scoring.
I would say that's probably not a conspiracy theory, because there is research that indicates, we know that the American military has monitored the behavior of people who play first person shooters, and they've even modeled the tactics of 12, 13, 14-year-old boys. Not with Call of Duty. It was a different game that's quite technical. I think it's called Rainbow Six. I've never played it, but apparently it's hard. And these kids were coming up with tactics that were better than the cutting edge tactics of special forces units. Yeah. Whoa. So we've already, that was years ago. That's more than 12, 13 years ago. So that gap has already been bridged. I'm sure that they're doing that.
Interesting. So yesterday, I had a discussion about an event that happened yesterday. This kid, was being really passive aggressive to me. I was riding my unicycle down the sidewalk near the castle. It's one of those roads that are kind of they go up the hill, so the sidewalk's really small and you never ever see anybody walking up them or down them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm riding down this thing, and then it was a dad and 2 kids. Maybe one was 16 and this kid was probably 19, right? The dad and the younger kid step aside so I can move or go past them. Mm-hmm. The 19-year-old just stands there. It just in the center. It just stands there. So I get off and I look at him. Can you move, please?
Mm.
No, it starts yelling at me, pointing at the bike lane. It starts going off and just bitching at me. So I like, don't worry, this ties into the concept, but like I go up to him, I get off the wheel, I look at him and I say, "Do you speak English?" And he goes, "No, no, no, English. Are you yelling at me?" He keeps going. I go, "Are you yelling at a stranger right now?" And he's and then I go, "Bitch, like fuck you." And I get really, really crazy. And he just gets like he just freaks out, right? And he doesn't exactly know what to do. And it started getting like kind of physical, and then we're shoving each other, getting like it got kind of like really intense. And finally I got past him, rode the wheel down. He's like, yeah, and walking away. And I told my friend this, and she gave the perspective of like, it seems like the stories are coming from a younger crowd that just don't realize the situation that they're putting themselves in, because they this has happened twice, where there was another guy who did the same thing practically and immediately backed down when I got super aggressive and nearly physical. So her theory was like, a lot of these kids, they don't really know what it's like to be in an actual physical confrontation, but they think that they do because of the video games, because of the movies they watch, because of the things they see on social media. They just think physical altercation and direct confrontation is just like pressing XY with your joystick and moving this, and it's just like, oh, you got it, 10 points for you, your first place, sort of a thing. But the moment that they get confronted with the adrenaline surge of that event, they just lose all frame completely. And I'm sure you've seen this quite a bit, being a bouncer for half of your life.
Yeah, there was a lot of that there. It's like I said to you last time I was in the Czech Republic, where sometimes there's been situations where people would begin a confrontation with me, and I would say, you have a hypothesis. Your hypothesis is that if we engage in physical conflict, that you will win. Would you like to test your hypothesis? And then they're like, hey, what? What's the hypothesis?
Right.
So there's an untested hypothesis sometimes. Sometimes it's been tested, but yeah, there is. I mean, it's a broader level problem, I suppose, with discouraging physicality in young people, demanding that they sit still and be quiet, and then giving them devices that effectively cause them to sit still and be quiet. So they're not really all that physical. When I was doing door work in England and in Tenerife, which was predominantly with English people, I had an easier time than when I went to New Zealand, because in New Zealand in 2010, I was having to deal with people who hadn't grown up sedentary. They weren't on the TV, on the couch watching TV every day. A lot of these kids walk to school barefoot. That's totally normal in New Zealand. You'll just see just hundreds of kids just walking around on concrete with bare feet, and they are outside and they're physical. And so when I would get hold of them, instead of getting hold of like a bag of mush that I could easily sling down the stairs, you'd get hold of them and be like, hey, you don't look that big, but you've got this weird, like, I've been running around and playing rugby my whole life strength.
Yeah, I see. Right.
So yeah, it does make that there is an issue of a lack of physicality that can be problematic. But the problem with somebody who's not been very physical but has been exposed to like torture and violence in films and in video games is the level of violence that they'll go to then doesn't have a sliding scale of restraint. They'll just kill people. They'll just kill them because they don't even have the capacity to sort of be like, hey,
do you think that would be the case? Or do you think that's the case, or do you think that they'll be so traumatized, introduced in that situation, that they couldn't even go past the first thing? Because that's my theory, where it's like they're so exposed to these things, and in their mind, they're the superhero, they're the soldier on the front line, they're the one that's rank 45 worldwide on Call of Duty, sort of a thing, So when they are even just confronted verbally, they just freeze up, because they're used to talking shit with a headset here with a giant TV plasma screen. But when they see the actual micro expressions, the adrenaline, the all that happens, their body just like kind of freezes up.
So there's two scenarios. Let's use British and Americans as the primary example because it's a similar culture in that regard. If you're talking bar fight, that individual that you're describing will fold because they don't know. They think that they know, but they do not really know. And then when they realize, it's kind of usually too late. The other scenario would be a battle zone where you have top level technology, literally in your hand.
That makes sense.
Yeah, right. So in the top level technology scenario, they will just kill people. In the barroom scenario, they will, in my experience, switch from aggressor to victim like that at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
No shame. No shame.
In terms of both of those situations, that definitely changes it, because I think in a war zone, the technology is also a middleman in terms of violence too, where it's like when you beat somebody up in public or you get in a physical confrontation with verbal escalation and body language, it's like this whole thing that envelops you to a point where it's just a really different sensation, I think. And then if you're in a war zone, you have the middleman of a giant metal rifle. You just like move your finger and then someone dies. The sliding scale in terms of how much input you have in action and the output is just so off. You're telling me you just move a finger like this and someone gets their head blown off.
Yes.
Or without that, you get in a bar fight, you have to extend your whole body, maybe throw like a good 10. Your body's exhausted from the adrenaline, and then maybe the punch lands, and maybe he even gets hurt from it or gets knocked out, So it's like this crazy imbalance when it comes to the input and output.
Definitely. It was one of the things teaching unarmed combat that I found the biggest challenge was getting people to deal with the level of commitment and intimacy that unarmed violence involves. It's a big commitment and it's extremely intimate. That ugly, stinking crackhead, you might have to stick your fist in their face several times and your thumb in their eye. And it's not pleasant because everything in you is like, ugh, get it away from me.
That's interesting that you're using the word intimate for this situation, because I think when people think about martial arts and self-defense, they think it's a really detached 1-2 textbook system where it's like you're not even in the fight. What you're there to do is know exactly when that hand's going to hit, and then you flip them over, and then just one chop to the esophagus right here puts them out. And it's like this detached, like almost video game mechanism. But when you're wrestling or you have physical altercation, it is like you're in it, and there's no detachment whatsoever.
Or you can smell them and you can hear them. Like, in what other scenario would you have a human being panting in your ear? It's only sex. It's only sex. Like you can hear them. Like you hurt them and they go, oh, and then they're struggling and they're going, it's like, dude, this is kind of gross, but let's not stop.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And I think we've talked about this. It was funny. We were in like a fancy ass sushi restaurant and I got so adrenalized eating the damn thing, telling you this other story, that I think I scared away half of the restaurant.
Yeah, you emptied it. You emptied the restaurant.
I fucking emptied the I was telling the story. I was like getting so animated in this, like I should have behaved, whatever. But we were talking about the deflection methods on how to basically scare people off or de-escalate or over-escalate to the point where nothing happens. And what I was saying was that my method, which was different from yours, was to almost overindulge to the point where you show commitment, like you were saying.
Yeah.
You overcommit. You show that you are absolutely ready, almost as if you're already done fighting or you're already in the middle of it. So that kind of gives them, like what you said was that it almost traumatizes them in that very moment because they were expecting the escalation. No, fuck you, no, fuck you. But if they're just like, nice hair, bag, and then you go, fuck you, get the fuck out of here, and then they're just like, oh shit, and then their body automatically reacts in a submissive manner from there. And that was my idea of like overcommitting. But you had a different method, and what was that?
Well, it would depend on the situation. So you can there's an English writer who was a martial arts instructor and also a nightclub bouncer for years. I think he called that posturing, where you would flare up and you would, like a monkey or a snake, and make a lot of noise and make yourself appear bigger. Because in the real world, people aren't scared of your quiet sort of Neo in the Matrix or Wong Fei Hong sort of character. Yeah. They're actually scared of the crazy crackhead who might bite them and give them AIDS. That's scary. He might smear you in his own poo-poo or something. It's going to be gross. Yeah. So when real world violence kicks off, one of the things I noticed when I was feeling fearful was, I think I'm afraid of humiliation as well. I'm afraid of falling over. I remember being in a fight and thinking, what if one of my shoes falls off and people see my socks?
Really?
Seriously, like weird stuff would, I mean, you got to remember though, that for 7 years of my life, I was doing this 5 or 6 nights a week. So I was just doing it all the time. Tenerife is like a holiday resort for English people, English and Scottish and Welsh people and Irish people. And it's rough. And I broke my knuckles that many times. I would just go to work with boxing wraps on because it was intense. It was really, really very, very rough. So, and I would feel fearful a lot of the time. And so, yeah, that method of posturing definitely could be dissuasive. The other method would be to reason with people, and that was dissuasive as well, because it's not expected. Where I would just very rationally just say, well, look, I've been interested in martial arts since I was 10. If it's a fight that you would like to have with me, I would certainly indulge you. But, you know, given the scenario that we're in, I'm not going to be nice to you. Like, I'm going to go for you. Is that what you really want? And so that was the cooler sort of methodology. And I don't remember anybody ever just at that point saying, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Let's test this.
Yeah, I think the discussion went further. So my idea with a lot of things from what I've seen, I feel like is often predicated on physical appearance. And I was saying, if we switched, would it work? If is that approach more effective because of how you look and possibly just your life experience almost showing through?
Is it my Dexter vibes coming through?
Your Dexter, those glasses aren't hiding those empty sociopathic eyes of yours, man.
This is a face that could easily just drill somebody right through the head.
Right. So yeah, like I'm wondering if I were to try to approach it like that, because if you do it, I feel like it's really intimidating. Where it's like, oh well, are you sure you really want to go? I've been here for 10 years.
It's intent. It's intent. I always used to teach people when I was training self-protection for people. I'd say, don't front. You can front, but you've got to be very careful because it's like a bluff in poker. And if somebody calls you, if they're good, because these street thugs aren't in the gym, they're not going to bother with boxing, but they can see weakness and they know like 2 techniques that they'll apply with savagery. So fronting is a dangerous game. I would never front. I would, in my mind, I'd be like, I might actually have to wrestle with this person right now, and I'd be ready to go. And if you're in that mental space, which I think is the mental space that you're accessing, then the animal in them feels the animal in you. And at the most primal, pre-conscious levels goes, ooh, fuck. I thought that I would get away with the same scheme I've run 20 times. Because they've probably learned this from an abusive stepfather, an abusive uncle. They tried it themselves and they found, fuck, it works. You can bully people by being like, hey, do you want, and people go, oh, no, I don't like it. Whereas then they meet one random psychopath who's like, yeah, I'll give you a go. And means, come, let's.
Right.
And it's back to that intimacy thing. You can feel when somebody's comfortable with the intimate ranges of, and you know, so me stepping in somebody's space and saying, I'm actually all right with us doing this. If that's really what you would like to test right now, let's do it. There's something a bit like off. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know this guy. I don't know if
the Dexter approach. I have the Joker approach. Basically, I'm cackling, running around with a revolver. You're kind of like.
But the thing with all of this is, of course, you know, I have to go into knee surgery in 2 weeks' time. I've got a cracked skull. I've had a traumatic brain injury. I've had spinal fluid coming up my nose. I've got scars. Still got glass in my eyelids, little pieces of glass. Yeah, I've been cut. I've been smashed with bottles, you know, and I've had really, really serious problems off the back of it. So there is a danger to all this. There's a real danger to it. And you get to a point where I think now, as I've gotten older, the better a life I have, the more fearful I've become. So I probably wouldn't be able to pull it off now. If I tried that approach, I don't think I'd be able, because I wouldn't mean it. I'd just be fronting.
I see. Oh, interesting. Yeah, like with this last situation yesterday, I approached it at first fairly calm, but like I had the intent in my eyes. But I don't know if he just has really hard time like reading social cues or whatever. Maybe I didn't come off as intimidating enough, but he didn't get the point after the first 3 questions that were really like,
yeah,
yelling at a stranger right now.
Yeah.
And then I just immediately just opened up, and then it was like sort of a thing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would say even in the realm of organized crime, where it's quite serious, military action, even 99% of human conflict is symbolic, but we have a strong impulse against intra-species violence. Like it's the ultimate taboo in any tribe, in any culture, anywhere in the world. You shouldn't really kill your brothers and sisters. Right. You're not supposed. Right. It's a big deal, and it's extremely traumatic when people break that boundary for them.
Yeah, that's very, very fascinating, because from my experiences, I don't think I've maybe gotten to one actual fight ever, and the rest I've postured enough to scare them off, and it's worked every single time. And I think that is because of what you're saying. The actual vision of direct physical confrontation is so off-putting naturally to most humans in general.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed it was 90% psychological. The escalation of confrontation and violence is just so easily escalatable, if that makes sense.
De-escalatable, yeah.
Yeah, because if you put down the cards, like obviously that I'm willing to right now, they'll automatically step back because of that. Where I noticed, sorry, you're gonna say something?
No, go on.
What I noticed is that when I do this, oftentimes it's in a public setting where everybody around can hear. And I noticed that people are actually more willing to back down from the fight because they don't want to cause a scene. They don't want other people to see.
So I'm not scared of that.
Shame. I'm not scared of that at all, which gives me the upper hand there. Sure, I might actually lose the fight, and maybe I might not be good enough in order to get in an actual physical element. But what I do know that I have is that I'm not scared of causing the scene, when most people, they don't even want to, they want to get in a fight almost quietly.
Yes. Yeah, they want to do it on their terms, and the willingness to causing a scene is another way of saying breaking social boundaries. So we're extremely civilized, meaning that we've undergone the process of civilizing. Men and women now are extremely civilized, and that's a good thing. It's progress, but we lose certain things. So when I was training people, and I will be training people again this year, I've got a seminar booked in August. It's a decivilizing process. So everything that I did was about decivilizing, because if even just hitting somebody in the face, you're not supposed to touch people's faces unless you're having sex with the person, or unless you made them through sex, and unless it's your offspring. Where would you touch somebody on the face? You don't
rarely ever. Even if you are intimate or having sex with somebody, you never actually, very rarely are you like that.
I do.
But you're a very rare one-of-a-kind person, Richard.
Is it okay if that just stays there?
Yeah, I'm jealous for whoever you get with it, man.
They're so lucky. They're so lucky. So when I would say to people, okay, I'm gonna teach you how to hit another person. They'd be like, yeah, I'm down for this. I know martial arts. And I'd be like, okay, let's do it. And then they start going like this, and the body is not committed. And instead of trying to teach them the physiology of good movement, I would just deal with the emotions. Because if I can tap the emotions, the physiology would follow. We've got to decivilize them. We've got to get them into a headspace where they can do this thing that is a total social taboo. For I think in the West, It's touching the face. In Thailand, it was the head.
Really?
You don't touch people. No, you don't touch people on the head in Thailand. It's not polite.
Huh.
It's really rude. It's really fucking rude.
Interesting.
Yeah, I resonate with that. I hate people touching me on the head. It really
You
sets
don't
me
like
off.
being touched at all, though.
That's true. Anywhere on my
You don't
flesh
like
could
hugs
mean
or
death.
anything, man.
So what you were saying about escalation and everything is relevant as far as this Trump and Iran thing goes, because what he has done with Iran and similarly with North Korea is, instead of being the reasonable, sober statesman, he's been the crazy, provocative troll guy saying the wrong things, doing the wrong things. I had a conversation with somebody the other night, and yet again, I'm no Trump fan, but I find myself wondering if he's crazy like a fox, or if the people who are guiding him, I'm wondering now if he's a scapegoat, a sock puppet celebrity. Put him in power, get him to do this, and this, and then impeach him and get rid of him. And it's all part of the deal. He knows it's coming, kind of thing.
Huh. Interesting.
Remember, I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, though.
Yeah. I mean, because like at the same time, I know that kind of shit works, but if it's at a worldwide massive scale with nukes involved, maybe we take the more diplomatic reasoning route, you know?
Well, okay, well, you and I are sort of, well, we've discussed this at length. We're both kind of left to center as far as politics goes. If you have a regime like Iran, would you take the diplomatic, calm Obama stance, or would you take the more aggressive Trumpian stance?
Yeah. Fuck, man.
I'm going to switch the power on my laptop whilst you think about that. Now, you think about that, Pierre.
Okay. Well, as the president of America, I know exactly what I would do in this situation. And that's just to actually bomb the entire globe. And that way there are no more humans and there would be no more problems. And I don't know if you guys agree with me on that, but I just think that at this point, we have absolutely no idea what we're doing anyways. So bye.
Yeah, humans aren't that great anyway. So just get rid of them. Just get rid of them. I thought it through, and I think at this time, in this way, it's not great. It's not great what he's done, but it is. If you reduce this to a nightclub, it's never a good idea to be fawning around violent psychopaths who are cultivating weaponry continuously. You can't, every once in a while, you've got to let them know that you're willing to do violence. It can't all be done with
and that's why I don't want to admit it, because in a closer microcosm of, like, you know, interpersonal communications, I do agree with that. How different is it when it's at a massive scale? Because it's like it might not be that different, but I don't want to admit that because so much more is at stake, as opposed to if you are at a club. It's way
so much, exactly, so much more is at stake. And this is if I was to play devil's advocate, I'd say that's the reasoning for doing it. Because not to go deep on the conspiracy theory with Flight 370, but I spent a long time reviewing all the details of Flight 370, and I think Iran took that plane. And I think they took that plane and they took the 30 passengers who worked for the Chinese company that was making these, oh my God, I've forgotten the word, how embarrassing. It's a microchip that is the guidance for smart bombs. I think the Iranians took them, they took the plane, they took those people, and they're in a dungeon somewhere being forced to work. And they're giving them the technology that would allow them one day to fly a nuke. Because you can build a nuke, but can you land it? That's the big question. You need tiny computers working very, very quickly to make that happen with any kind of effect. So I think they did that. I think Iran is working a secret program desperately as fast as they can to cultivate weaponry, which is fine in and of itself. I'm like, well, if I was Iran, I would be doing that too. That's what I would do. Totally. I would be like, I'm not going to sit here being all defenseless and waiting for something to happen. But similarly, the people who are not Iran should not discipline them, but put into the environment, look, we know what you're up to, and we are willing to take an action against you. The only way to maintain peace is by being willing to go to war at this stage in human evolution. Yes, I have those liberal components of me that say, no, we should all go for peace, but that's not yet. We're not seeing that for another 20, 30, 40,000 years of evolution. So for now, we have to have violence on the table.
Yeah, and while you give the more global perspective of that situation, I see it. But you know this too from just the more subjective, casual setting. And as much as I want to believe, I have a very, very hippie, bohemian side that I wish we could just all love each other and like not do those things. But in all of my experiences, I have let so many people run over me in that sense where I didn't even open myself up to confrontation or even give them the idea that confrontation could arise from me. And each time it just ended up where, I ran with the damn nukes in a more smaller metaphorical sense. Whereas if the moment that I immediately display myself, maybe in signaling it physically from what I wear, but also verbally too, was the only time that people wanted to be peaceful with me.
Yes. I think that's where, unfortunately, those kinds of boundaries that are inflicted under the threat of violence are still necessary. What you said about people loving each other, I don't think that's too idealistic. I think if you stuck Iranian people and American people or British people or Iraqi people together in a room, it would be fine, because it's not the people, it's the government. And who are the governments? Well, they're the narcissists and psychopaths who want to be in power. So it's really the worst elements of each country that go to war with each other.
Oh shit! Yeah. Oh, fascinating. And then they're the ones that manipulate everybody else into fighting the war for them.
Well, that's what you like in the film, like I saw last night, 1917. It's very young men, predominantly very young. Shockingly young. To me, anybody really under your age is like, wow, you're young as fuck. But those are the people who fight the wars. If you're 19, I wouldn't really trust you to blow your own nose, let alone go and do some mission in a foreign land.
Yeah, and I'm also considering like, okay, so they're super young, they're super idealistic, and they obviously are doing it for reasons that probably go against what the higher ups want. Maybe they want to be accepted, maybe they want a sense of self-worth, maybe they want to do something for their family and their country. I would hope that most of the time it's for virtuous reasons. But what if before all of them, you put them all in a real street fight first? Would they agree to go to war right after that?
Do you mean the people who are in charge if you made them physically fight with each other?
The soldiers, or maybe even the higher ups too. But I'm thinking like, what if you introduced the young generation into actual confrontational violence first, and then would they still want to go to war if they knew the repercussions of direct violence?
The young generation never really want to go to war in any country ever. So what you do, the infantry is called the infantry because they are treated like infants. This is historical record. That's not.
Oh, fuck.
It's an insult.
Okay.
It's an insult. I say this as a man who wanted to be in the infantry. I went for potential officer training at the King's Regiment and for the Parachute Regiment, and I knew what it meant. I knew exactly what it meant when I was trying to get in. The only reason I didn't join was because I got glassed the night before my final RCB in the face. And yeah, infantry means infants. You are the children. You're the cannon fodder, and it's class based. It's the Brits that formalized this. The French taught it to us, but we really perfected it. It's class based. So you take young, poor people. The officers will be around 30 years old, and then the majors and the generals will be like 50, 60 years old. And it's wealth. It's a hierarchy of wealth. So it's the poorest fighting on behalf of the richest, and the least. Of course, the poorest will be, especially in times gone by, with no internet, the least educated, extremely ignorant people who could barely read or write. And they would go with a gun, and you'd say, "Now you do as you're told." You traumatize them, you trauma bond them, you beat them up, you break them psychologically, and you say, "You do as you're told, even if you're scared to death." You'll be more fearful of the punishments of the military and the institution than you are of the enemy.
I never thought about that. That's really
It's evil. It's pure evil.
They're more scared of the punishment from who they're fighting with than actually the confrontation in war from with the opposite.
Yes. So we had a number of cases. It's very controversial in the UK of men in World War One. Huge number of men being tried and condemned for cowardice because they wouldn't go over the top in the trenches, which was, I can't imagine physically what that would be like. I mean, you literally lift your head and it's going to get blown off. Right. And there's a sergeant next to you with a gun saying, go up or else, or I'll shoot you, or there'll be a military tribunal and British soldiers will shoot you.
Did you hear? I read somewhere that on Christmas, somebody started playing a horn and they just stopped fighting for like a day on Christmas Day. Is that true? Do you know that?
Yeah, they played football. They got in no man's land and they played football with each other.
If it's that easy, if it's that easy on everybody's collective free will, in the midst of fighting, in the midst of war, where all of their friends have had their heads blown off and choked on mustard gas, if you just hear a horn playing and they decided to play football with each other in that very moment, why is it so fucking hard to do that every day?
They were singing carols. So they would sing, like they'd sing the carol, the same music in German, and we'd be singing it back in English. And then people, but think of the strength of the narrative. We were only there fighting because of the strength of the narrative that we were in. Why did we stop fighting that day? Because everybody was Christian. Everybody was still very devoutly Christian in Northern Europe. Germans and English people were devoutly Christian. We had way more history of killing each other in Britain over Christianity. We were devout, fervent, what you would consider an extremist fundamentalist. We were torturing each other. We were murdering each other in huge numbers. We had wars that went on for decades over it. So we were extremely Christian. So on Christ's birthday, not a shot would be fired, because that's the superior narrative. So that narrative won on that day. And the obviously the officer class were terrified by that.
That just blows my mind. Like, that is the most cognitive dissonance I think a human can possibly have.
It's crazy. It's totally crazy.
I don't get it. I don't even know what to say about the situation, is because, I mean, how long was the war being fought before that Christmas came around, first of all?
I don't know which. It wasn't a long war. World War One compared to Afghanistan went on for 14 years. I think World War One is 3 years, or maybe four. So like,
fucking hell, you're fighting for at least a year or a few months at least, and
they were in trench warfare. So they've been. I mean, it was horrendous. It was a fucking horrendous war of attrition. You know, man versus man. Just this is how my great grandfather was killed in World War One. Storming. He was 41 years old and he was in the infantry. He was drafted, and he was in Greece at Thessaloniki, and he was fighting alongside the Serbians against the Bulgarians, and they were just throwing English, French, and Serbian soldiers against a Bulgarian position up a hill where they were in a bunker with machine guns, and they were just flinging men at them. They gassed the bunker. The wind changed and brought the gas back down to them. So they got them to mask up and then storm up the hill. So they were running up a steep hill with a gas mask on, with all their kit, just getting mown down and being gassed to death by their own gas. Not pleasant. Not pleasant.
Look, it makes sense. If you're already, you declare the war and you're fighting for 2 years, maybe even 6 months, and you're continuously fighting.
Yeah.
And keep going. But what doesn't make sense to me is that these same individuals, after a year, are willing to, on their own free will, to start singing carols to each other, and play football, and then continue again.
Yeah.
That thought process, just, I have a really, really hard time wrapping my head around that.
Oh, well, just do 10 years of working life coaching with people and get into human psychology, and you'll have no problem with it whatsoever. Basically, the whole of human existence is inside of what Freud called the fetishist split. We know, and we do not know. And everything we do takes place here. We know and we do not know. And that is the fetishist split. We know very well that those German boys that you're trying to kill are the same as you. They're the same class. They're farmers. They're factory workers. They can't read and write very well. They're the same age as you. They're the same background, probably like very similar religion to you. We're all Christians. But they're the enemy today, and this is what we're doing for what? For king and country. So king and country is the fetish. The badge is the fetish. The army, the navy, is the fetish. And we know very well it's bullshit. We know, everybody knows it's bullshit on some level, and yet we choose to live as though it's not, because we have to. We just have to. We're compelled to.
But now that I think about it, I guess it does make sense, because I have to think very locally in order to like really piece these ideas together. So in this sense, I guess it does happen every Christmas with every family. I mean, what family is purely functional anyways? So everyone's carrying around the baggage of how everyone's treated each other over the last 10, 20 years. And then on Christmas, let's put our guns down and open some presents together and pretend like nothing happened. And then the day is over, and then you're stuffed with turkey meat and ham and sweet potatoes, and then you go back to fighting the moment the new year starts, or you still holding on to this baggage. So I guess in that sense, it does make a lot more sense.
When I was a child, I would sit with my grandfather and my great grandfather. I'm named after my great grandfather, he was called Dick, Grandpa Dick, and he had one arm and an eye patch because he was in the parachute regiment, and he'd been hit with a mortar, but the mortar didn't go off. It bounced off his head, ruined his vision, so he had to have an eye patch and took his arm off. And then my grandfather was fighting alongside a Canadian pilot whose name escapes me. Get this. This Canadian pilot got a war memorial raised for him in Japan by the Japanese. The Japanese thought this guy was like just a super warrior, samurai level. He's a white guy, Canadian, because he was fighting against the Japanese, and he got hit, and he chose to kamikaze his plane into the ship that had hit him. So military, it's like both sides of my family it's a military style background. I could never understand, in all the conversations I heard that were from firsthand experience, from people who'd lived it, why do you have rules of war? What the fuck is a rule of war? They go, oh, well, you could shoot a man's brains out, but you couldn't capture him and torture him. It's against the rules of war. You can use this bullet, but you can't use this bullet. You can use this grenade, but you can't use that. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Then as I grew older, I was like, oh no, that makes sense now. Whatever age I was, where the rules of war made sense, that's the moment where I entered the fetishist split, where the idea is we're going to go full out, we're going to war, we're going to kill each other, but we're still going to be gentlemen about it, because we wouldn't want to go too far now, would we? And we still live in that world. That's what the Geneva Convention is. You're allowed to bomb, burn, stab, and shoot, but within these rules. You tell me how that isn't, how could anybody deny that we all live inside of a fetishist split as far as war is concerned? What the fuck is the rule of war?
Does that still make sense to you, or are you just more like, where are you on that idea nowadays?
Where it gets slotted for me would be, the sort of there's a wall in my head with like memos on it, with stickers, with bits of string, and it's just labeled fetishist split. And that end of the wall has a subtitle on it that's marked civilization. That's what being civilized is. Rape, kill, torture, but not too much. Don't enjoy it. Just a little.
Yeah. Fuck.
What did you want to talk about today?
I don't know. It's just like we haven't done a talk yet in a while, or actually, like, we haven't done talking a while on this channel. True. So I was like, we're gonna do a podcast. Now we're talking about murdering, and so yeah, like in terms of rules of war and shit, I don't get rules of conflict and fighting and war and all that
engagement. You're gonna say
it really makes sense to me, because if you're willing to go there already, you might as well like do what you need to do. But like, I don't know, I look at things like, for example, the Civil War and stuff, and they're dressed up in like the dopest jackets ever, and then they just stand in rows across from each other and listen to some man say fire, and then they get their head blown off. It just makes no sense. Why are you doing that?
And you have to hold still Don't break the line. Stay in your square. Yeah, a lot of that is huh?
It's like, what the fuck is that? Why would you voluntarily on both ends just wait for your head to get blown off?
There are modern. I don't. This is not my field of expertise. I know a little bit about it, but there are like modern fringe historians who say that really that type of thing that we see, it didn't happen very much. Number one, and number two, when armies would get together, and there is evidence for this because my channel was named the Spartan Life Coach, and the Spartans are famous for inventing the phalanx. Well, they didn't invent it, they perfected it, which is we take a shield wall and we use a shield wall. Now, why is having a shield wall so important in a battle? Some people are saying it's because actually these battles were semi-symbolic. Actually, they would get together, you'd show your horses. That's why the uniforms are bright and showy, because they're to terrify you. It's not like nowadays where we're used to fashion and color and like zing and zang and they had no stimulation. They're farmers. They just sit there for days like just staring at a bit of grass and a cow. So they see noise. The trumpets are playing. They would go to war with drums and trumpets and color, and you're supposed to rah, and everybody goes ooh, and it's symbolic. You're supposed to sort of look at each other and go, do we want this or not? And then you get together and you push and you kind of just shove each other a bit with your shields and go rah. And some people die and get injured, but it's not as savage as we now believe. Like the gladiators, they were not death matches. They would be death matches 1 in every 20 fight, because you don't kill the people who are entertaining you. Every once in a while there'd be a death, but most of the gladiator matches did not end in death. Now you tell me, if me and you are going to fight each other with machetes, how the hell are we not going to kill each other? Well, you'd have to sort of show pony it. You'd dab at each other. You'd only cut into the belly or the thighs. You'd stay away from the. Do you know what I'm saying? It's symbolic violence, and I think that this theory holds a lot of water. I think it's probably true. Show up, bang your drums, scream, shake your spears, and hope that they go away. But sometimes they don't, and then you have slaughter. You have the Battle of Agincourt, which probably, I won't bore everybody with the details of the Battle of Agincourt, but I imagine that the French really thought that the English were going to capitulate that day. They're just because the French turned up with the cavalry and went, look, we're fucking huge and we're on these big tall horses. You're a bunch of peasants. We're nobility. Bow down. And we went, nah, fuck off, and shot them to death with arrows.
So I do believe that, because from what I'm thinking about, I think because we've developed a lot since then, even though we're still fucking each other up in war, I don't think it happens as much as it used to, or at least just not so commonly. And we found out other outlets. I think one of the biggest outlets that could justify this theory are like mosh pits at rock concerts, because that's symbolic violence with symbolic music to represent war, you know. And then they have this thing called the Wall of Death, where you have both sides. I don't know if you've ever seen this happen, but
I've done it. I used to get in mosh pits. I loved them.
Do you know what the Wall of Death is?
No.
So what they do is that they tell everybody to split down the center like Moses in the seas, you know?
Right. So
they literally spread out maybe like 30 feet away from each other. And then the singer would be like, 3, 2, 1, go. And they'll just literally just run towards each other in that symbolic act of war almost. And it's like fulfills that inner primal need of violence and war through the music, through that act, through everything else. And everyone seems satisfied and happy with it, you know. So
well, and to tag on to that, to what I was saying about violence being symbolic, there's 3 things I've done. One thing is mosh pits every weekend for about 3 years when I was a kid. The second thing is Systema, which is a Russian martial arts style where they're very interested in group attacks. So you'll do live drills where you'll be attacked by 6 people at once. It's not full force. You do it at a moderate level of force. And the third thing is I used to work, train inside of a ninjutsu society where we would do battles with weapons, but you were only allowed 2 techniques. So it was controlled. It was extremely controlled. In all 3 of those scenarios, they descend into utter fucking chaos inside of about 5 seconds. You don't know which way is up. So when I see on film the battles, and they're all like Braveheart did it, and you see these, and I'm like, you physically can't. You kill your own men. You find out straight away. You swing backwards with a sword, you fucking pierce somebody's brain. Right. You can't move. You stand there like that, and you're like, friend or foe, friend or foe. I don't know. It's so overwhelming and noisy. Right. You can't see anything. So I'm really, really suspicious when we see this is what warfare was. I think all warfare, the proper military term for that is asymmetrical. I think all warfare is won and lost in asymmetrical circumstances. All warfare really is won and lost through guerrilla style tactics. And we know this now, but we've only just recently learned it, actually, the Brits and the Americans. There is something called the Asymmetrical Warfare Office of America, who I followed for years because I just thought they were cool. I liked their title, and their slogan was a Navajo symbol, and it said, normal is the setting on a washing machine. It said it in Navajo. The idea being that there's no such thing as normal warfare. Everything is asymmetrical. And they actually closed the office because they realized it's redundant. It's totally redundant to talk about asymmetrical warfare when it's all asymmetrical. The British, I'm going off on my conspiracy theory tip here, years ago snuck through a bill to spend something close to £1 billion on 22,000 new special forces soldiers by next year. And they put that bill through 5 years ago. So for the last 5 years, they've been recruiting, training a whole new special forces unit. We're a country of 60 million, and we're setting up for 22,000 special forces infantrymen. We're planning World War III. We've been planning it for years. It's an inevitability. But my point is, it will be asymmetrical. When you have drones and smart bombs, you won't have normal infantry is going to be totally redundant. It'll either be special forces or drones and smart bombs. There won't be anything else. So it's all going to be non-symmetrical.
Yay.
So anyway, mumble rap. Wow, what's the silliest thing you saw on YouTube this week?
Like what you were saying about like getting in when you don't know which way is up and which way is down. Yeah. You do see those war scenes where everyone's running at each other, and the main protagonist is so grounded and knows exactly where to go.
They have space around them. It's like Bruce Lee standing in the middle of 6 guys so he can side.
Never been to a concert. You don't even have to be in a mosh pit to know to lose yourself in what orientation is which. If you just sit here and just headbang for like 15 seconds, you wouldn't even know where anything is. But if you looked at it, you'd be like, how does it, like, it doesn't look like you're doing anything that crazy. But when you're the one like banging your head, you're in it. It's all great. Of orientation in the span of like 10 seconds.
Yeah. It's a very cathartic experience, the mosh pit. I highly recommend it to people. Perhaps I'll start recommending that as a therapeutic modality on Spartan Life Coach, and we'll see how that goes over.
Do you think we'll get one day where we solve our differences through video game warfare?
In the real world between nations? Mm-hmm. There's a good book. It's not a good film. Don't watch the film.
There was a movie on that, I think.
Ender's Game. Yeah. The book is one of the best sci-fi books ever written. The movie is a steaming pile of dog shit. The dog has a bad stomach and had eaten something terrible, so it's like liquidy. God, it's awful. I hate that film because it ruins the book. But the book is excellent.
Do you think that it would work? Do you think it would develop the same catharsis?
Well, they weren't only fighting. They thought that they were fighting simulated battles, but they were actually kids who were being hijacked to fight real battles against, I think it was an alien force. They were actually really killing people. We would do that. I'm sure we would do that. But no, I don't think you can resolve these. Not at this stage in human evolution. We're in a very strange period because I think this is an intelligence issue. If you're 10 points on the IQ spectrum higher than somebody else, let me say it like this. Say you have somebody who's average IQ, and then you're 10 points higher than average, just 10, not 40. You're not a genius, just 10. You're so significantly different to them. And the research backs this. Your lifestyle, your money, your happiness, your health, everything, that you're almost at a different stage of evolution, 10 points higher. But there are dudes and dudettes out there who are 40, 50, and 60 points higher. So it's like we're a species with multiple subspecies within the species. And we're on different. So me and you can sit here and we can say, oh, okay, we're going to resolve it like this. But if we only represent, based on our IQ, 30% of the population, well, the other fucking 70 is going to win.
Right.
Because stupid people dig their fucking heels in, and they're really determined because they're not clever enough to realize that they shouldn't be that certain about anything.
Yeah.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes. And I don't think have we talked about this or not? But George Carlin has a good bit on it. But to summarize it, it's like the average person, think about the stupidest person you know, and then the majority of the population is 10 times stupider than the stupidest person you know.
The majority of the population. Yeah.
So the dumbest guy of your entire past.
Yeah.
Most of the population is 10 times dumber than that dude.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I catch myself in this situation a lot because not only am I a semi-recluse and I don't exactly put myself out there with every single person that I run into, I generally try to surround myself with people within I can, formulate a good discussion over. I forget that a good amount of the general population aren't exactly like that. Not saying I'm smarter than them in any way. They just have their own lifestyle with their own philosophies that do not correlate with mine whatsoever.
Or you're smarter than them.
Or I'm the smartest motherfucker alive, maybe.
There's a lot of really stupid people around. I mean, and it's like this social taboo. I'd be happy to say it here. I probably wouldn't say this on Spartan Life Coach because it's the kind of thing that gets you deplatformed. But
yeah, I forget that a lot of the general public that you run into are not of the same mindset. And I have to remind myself constantly that I'm just purposely putting myself in this bubble where it's not an echo chamber necessarily, but I guess a bubble of the similar thought patterns and whatever else.
But we discussed this with the last time I was in Prague about looking around and the way I am with people. You were saying I was quite smooth with people, and I said the baseline human state is vulnerability, panic, fear. People are just cobbled together.
Right.
Also, like a lot of people are stupid, so you do have to be kind to that. It comes back to the violence thing. Like, are you gonna punch somebody in the jaw because they're genetically not as gifted as you? That's not kind. And I have to say that to myself sometimes. I'm like, don't be a dick. Like, don't get into that. Because I used to get into fights that were justified. They were legally justified. They were morally justified. But I was playing a game because I knew these people were dumber than me. Mm-hmm. So I'd be like, well, they started it. And why did they start it, Richard? Because I was looking at them like this, knowing that would make them start a fight with me. And I'd be like, well, legally, I've done nothing wrong. Morally, all I'm doing is looking at them, but I deliberately provoke them. So it's unkind. It's not cool. It's bad karma to do shit.
Yeah. Richard, I have to go soon. I have a photo shoot this weekend and we are borrowing clothes from a fetish shop. So I get to go to my first BDSM fetish shop and see what they have to offer.
What the fuck, dude?
Yeah, it's not that crazy of a photo shoot. It sounds like.
When I said the fetishist split, I wasn't talking about your bum crack and a pair of leather chaps.
This whole time, I thought that's what you meant. I'm just trying to take your advice, man.
I'm talking Freud. You're talking, well, you're probably talking Freud as well. Let's be honest. So you're going to a BDSM store where people who've repressed all their desires, and then it comes out in like weird things. Like, oh, smack me in the face with a bit of wet fish.
It's just for fashion. I'm honestly very vanilla myself. I talked to a girl the other day. She seemed like the most innocent, sweet little like mystical elf fairy type girl. And she tells me she's into BDSM. I'm like, whoa. Some repression going here, huh?
How angry with daddy are you? That's what I'd be asking.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I have another interview to do.
Oh, shit. I'm having a
great pleasure talking to you, though, sir.
Yes, of course. I hope to talk to you again soon. And hello and goodbye to everybody in the chat right now.
That was beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and your attention. I have been Richard Grandin, and this is Mr. Pierre XO. Yeet, yeet.
Yay, yay.